Hey guys, today's lecture is all about the basics of post-production audio. You might hear this referred to as sound design for film. Basically what we're talking about is all the collection of assets, audio assets, meaning elements of sound that are going to comprise all the different pieces of a film project. So we're going to get into some of the basics today about just like what post-production audio is, what it's all about, the various stages of it, and we're going to move on from there, all culminating with you guys recreating your own sound design for a movie scene that already exists. So let's get right to it. So the elements of sound design or audio post-production, there's a couple of different ones here, and you can think of them referred to in different ways, but really what we're talking about here is production sound, which is anything that is captured on set when things are actually being video recorded. Background atmospheres, so sounds that define an environment or a location. Sound effects that are a little bit more specific with on-screen action as opposed to those background sounds. Dialogue, of course, everything that your actors and actresses are saying, or maybe it's some sort of narration. And then the film music, which of course is going to play a hugely important role on mood and emotion. So we'll go into a little bit more detail of each one of these things, and we'll definitely be watching some examples of this kind of stuff. So we're going to start off with production sound. Production sound is all that audio captured while the filming process is going on. So you've got a boom mic operator who's standing over, the actors in a location, trying to make sure that that equipment stays out of the camera shots and everything, but is capturing whatever audio they can. Now, there's a lot of reasons why production sound may not be too usable. So that's why we say it's often unusable. So we capture this sound and we hope to use it, and we want to capture that natural performances from the actors and from those scenarios, but sometimes it's not really usable because you might have a lot of noise happening on set if you've got a lot of moving pieces, if the camera operators have to be moving around, or you have directors saying things and this other chatter, or maybe an airplane flies by overhead or a helicopter or something that might ruin that performance. So we might have to recreate that stuff instead of using production sound. It also gives us an opportunity, during production, your actors might have a cold that day, so they might sound a little weird, and we have to, based on timing constraints, we've got to get through some things, and we've got to work through, the scenes and stay on schedule, but we may not want to actually use the audio capture then because of this poor performance or maybe the way that somebody sounds. And there might be a various, other uncontrolled sort of circumstances. Maybe it's the lighting equipment is making a noise. Maybe there's, for some reason, lots of bugs out that day and it's buzzing around, or something. Maybe the audio person forgot to hit record, God forbid. So there's other reasons why production sound may not be usable. And so this really fits in well to what we're going to be doing for our project, because we're going to act as if we have no production sound whatsoever. So these couple of things that we talk about here is pretty much the extent of where we go with production sound, because we're going to be recreating all of this stuff ourselves. And as a result, this next video that sort of discusses, the people and the staff that's involved with production sound is a little bit longer than most, but this is an important one because it kind of leads us through a bunch of different things that we're going to spend very limited amount of time on. So let's go ahead and watch this video.
The process starts with the boom operator and mixer. A boom operator is responsible for capturing the audio, and the mixer is responsible for setting the proper levels and recording the audio. The sound they capture on set is called production sound. It should be noted that on many indie film sets, that these two jobs are rolled up into one, with the boom operator also working as their own mixer. Sometimes the person doing the job is just simply referred to as the sound recordist. Once the film or documentary is complete, and the film has been locked, it is sent to the supervising sound editor. The supervisor works closely with the director to ensure the soundtrack for the film matches the director's vision. The supervising sound editor will also be responsible for managing the entire post-production sound team. So who are the people that the supervising sound editor manages? Well, there are a few people involved in the process. Each sub-department is often made up of both supervisors and editors. but for simplicity's sake, let's assume that there is only one person in each department. First, we have the dialogue editor. He works only with the project's dialogue track. Next, we have the ADR editor. She is responsible for re-recording dialogue that, for whatever reason, couldn't be captured on set properly. Next, you have the background editor, responsible for laying in and editing the background tracks. These tracks are sometimes simple and other times more complex atmospheric tracks that help to define the acoustics of the environment. Next, we have the sound effects editor. You'll often find him searching through sound libraries or out in the field recording non-diegetic sounds. That is, sounds that are not motivated by some action within the scene. For example, maybe a low-frequency impact, like this. Next, you have the Foley artist. This editor is responsible for handling the Foley sounds for the project, punches, cloth movement, footsteps, etc. These are diegetic sounds. Diegetic sounds are sounds that are motivated by some action within the scene. For example, the sounds of footsteps you hear right now. Next, the music editor will work with the soundtrack by editing and syncing the music into the project. When everything is done, the mix goes to the re-recording mixer, who will be responsible for building the final soundtracks by mixing all of the elements together to get the best results. However, it needs to be stated that the entire process hinges on the first steps of the process. A problem that is created in the first stage of production is simply passed to the next person in the production line. Even the best editors can't make a terrible recording sound great. For example, if the boom operator and mixer captures bad dialogue on set, this problem is then transferred to the supervising sound editor, who will then pass the audio to the dialogue editor. Hopefully, the dialogue editor will have an alternative track to use and can throw out the poorly recorded audio. But if there is no other option, he'll need to use the poor quality dialogue track and simply try to mask or filter the problem. He'll then transfer the problem to the re-recording mixer, who will need to find a way to draw attention away from the poorly recorded audio. There is no way to make poorly recorded dialogue sound great. The best you can do is try to mask it, filter it, or spend time and money re-recording it. In the end, you might need to reshoot the scene if your budget allows for it, or you may need to scrap the scene altogether. Every production varies, but this is how a traditional sound department looks, more or less. However, on most indie film sets, it's not uncommon for one or two people to be responsible for the entire process. This is a massive undertaking and requires an incredible amount of patience, organization, creativity, and skill. If you're doing all jobs, or most of them, by rushing in the beginning stages, you're only opening a world of problems for yourself later on. The good news is that most of these problems can be avoided with proper planning. So let's jump into the discussion on sound during the pre-production stages. The process of sound planning starts at the script stage. A writer shouldn't write a story focused on making the sound recordist's life easy. For example, the moment a writer types the following, they're opening up an entire world of problems for the sound recordists. Here is our industrial area. We could shoot here. This is, after all, what the story calls for. The writer writes this without thinking about how this will affect the soundtrack for the film. Which brings me to the next point, which is locations. As we just stated, the writer will write this location to be part of the story, without thinking about how the sound of an industrial area may muddy, mask, or otherwise interfere with the dialogue track, like it's doing right now with my voice. But it's not the writer's job to avoid this location, if this is what the story calls for. It's the sound team's job to anticipate these problems before going in, and then find solutions to these problems once they are there. With proper planning and communication, the sound team will be able to decide if this location is ideal to shoot in, what gear will be needed to be used for optimal audio results, and how to position themselves to ensure the most isolated and clean audio recording possible. In the example we're looking at here, the noise from location is too loud for us to record any quality dialogue. We can try adjusting the levels a bit, but since the actor's voice will be recorded with this noise, we'll also be turning down the levels on their voice as well. In this case, my voice is used to illustrate the point. But if this was a film or documentary, it would be the subjects within the scene whose voices would be affected. So let's change locations. There, that's much better. It's still industrial looking, but it's much, much quieter. In fact, maybe a bit too quiet. But that's not a problem. We can introduce new isolated sound layers like this. And this. Now when I speak, you can adjust the levels on the individual layers so my voice fights through the mix and is clear and intelligible for the audience. In short, sound should be everyone's concern. The majority of fixing audio happens during location scouting and through proper communicating with other departments. This leads us to our next point. There is a misconception amongst beginners which leads them to believe that sound problems can be fixed by surgically removing offending sounds you don't want in a recording. This is true sometimes, but not all of the time. Let's look at an example.
Here we have the sound of a fan in the background. If you wanted to preserve my voice, it would be difficult because me and the fan share common frequencies.
So let's try to fix this problem by removing the frequencies of the fan from the recording. Let's listen to both the before and after clips. Here is the clip without any post-production work done on it.
So by removing those frequencies, you're also changing the dynamics of my voice.
And here we have the clip after we've surgically removed the frequencies of the fan in the background.
So by removing those frequencies, you're also changing the dynamics of my voice.
You see, the problem is that many sounds aren't easily isolated because they share common frequencies with other sounds in the recording. This brings us to the last point of this tutorial, which is that good audio is not the sole responsibility of the sound department. The sound department will rely on all departments to help them capture good sound. Proper communication across departments will help you solve problems before they can even become problems. Let's take a noisy room and work towards making it more sound-friendly by properly communicating with other different departments on set. Here are 10 things you can do to greatly increase the quality of your recordings. First, turn off all mechanical and electrical devices, AC, phones, fans, fridges, computers, and so on. 2. Ensure windows and doors are closed. 3. Scout for quiet times at that location. 4. Remember to lock it up. Cast and crew who are not required for a scene should remain close to set in case they're needed, but far enough away not to be heard. 5. Allow the boom operator and mixer into rehearsals. Not only will this help them figure out their sound levels, but it will also help them position themselves within the scene to ensure they are not casting boom shadows on the walls. 6. It's also a good idea to do a quick test recording and make sure it sounds right on your playback system. 7. A director and sound team should decide if there are any wild lines they want re-recorded as soon as the scene is finished. 8. If the scene requires movement from the crew, such as the director, camera operator, or boom operator, you should ask them to wear socks or quiet footwear and ask them to step in unison with the talent. 9. A sound recorder should bring up any concerns about noisy props, clothing, or jewelry, for example, wristwatches that beep every hour, metal bracelets that clank together, and so on. And lastly, 10. A director should always give the sound recorders a bit of time before or after the shoot to capture room tone. So your audio recording using the exact same gear could transform from this to this, with just smart thinking and good communication.
All right, I like that video because it goes through just a whole bunch of really important things that have to deal with that production sound, which again, we unfortunately won't be doing too much of because we're not part of an actual film crew. We're just going to get some of the experience of the post-production stuff. So moving on, the next element of audio post-production was backgrounds. So these are those sounds that define an environment or a location. Those sort of like things that are just audio wallpaper. They're hanging out, and they're illustrating the location that you're in. Maybe they're, oftentimes they're going to be realistic. And they're going to really paint a picture for what you're seeing visually, but other times they might also be contradictive to make you feel a certain way. But really, this is going to come down to going out to a location and holding a microphone and recording for many minutes. And there's also, what we're going to be doing is finding libraries that have this sort of content in existence already. So the way that you create these backgrounds are by on-site recording, by going out with some sort of microphone rig like you see here, setting it up and just letting it roll and making sure that there's going to be no interruptions. For example, that picture that we're seeing here on screen, if you're trying to get the sound of bugs and birds chirping and maybe some wind through the blades of grass and stuff, what you probably don't want is a bunch of traffic noise, so you've got to be far enough away to not have those kind of things. Sound effects libraries are areas where we're going to be drawing content from, and that might be YouTube content that we find now. And there's lots of other sites that have things available. The BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, has a huge sound effects library that you can have access to. And when we're thinking about actually putting this stuff together, this will be one of the first assignments that you have when we start recreating your sound design, is there's going to be many different layers of things happening. And we'll go into more detail about this in a further lecture, but if you can just imagine again the picture that we're looking at, you're going to have wind noise, you're going to have bugs, you're going to have birds, you might have rodents or squirrels, or if it looks like it's maybe near a farm, then you might hear a rooster or some other animal noises. There might be planes flying overhead or traffic noise off to the side that you can't see. So there's going to be all those different background elements that need to be layered on top of each other to paint the picture of this environment or location. Okay, and here's a quick example of just what it looks like to be a in backgrounds or atmosphere recording artist. So let's take a look. So obviously you have to be very patient. And you've got to be creative in thinking about, well, where are these locations where I'm going to be able to capture these kind of cool sounds? And then, of course, not interfering with the sound yourself. Alright, so obviously you've got to have patience to go through all those kinds of things for recording background sounds. Next up on the list is sound effects. Hugely important because they are tied to so much visual action that's happening in a video. So we're reinforcing the things that we're seeing. We might also be helping to reinforce some sort of mood or emotion that the director is intending the audience to have. So that's going to affect, what sound effects we choose or how we create them. So again, they're coming from archived sound effects libraries, which means that somebody was just, recording these various sounds. Take glass breaking, for example, and recording, small glass breaking, large glass breaking, lots of pieces. So you're going to have a selection of different things to choose from like that, and you're going to have to make some choices about what fits best. But you might also create those yourself in a process called Foley. We were going to be doing a lot more of that, should we have had access to the studio. And Foley is the process of creating the sound effects while you're watching the video. So you're actually, performing some of the action while you're watching it. You're setting up a microphone and you're choosing a certain pair of shoes and walking on a particular surface to match the sound effects of the footsteps of particular characters. You're rubbing pieces of cloth together to match the movement of the characters, or you're doing a sword fight or something like that. So a couple of different ways we can approach sound effects. Obviously, what we're going to be doing for our sound design recreation is going to be a lot more of this archived sound effects library material. The hugely important thing here is that they've got to be perfectly in sync with what's happening on screen. Because if you have those things, we're going to have a massive attention to detail when it comes to placing these sound effects in the right location. We're going to get real specific about it, because if they're slightly off even, then it sort of breaks the illusion, and then you lose the engagement of the audience, and that's certainly something we don't want. All right, quick video on creating sound effects. That's pretty interesting.
I'm Rick Veers, sound designer and author of the Sound Effects Bible, and this is Road University. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, sound effects. I've been in the sound effects business for over a decade, and I think it's some of the most fun you can have while recording. At the Chop Shop, we've recorded everything from lions and machine guns to door knocks and car crashes. One thing that I've realized over the years is that microphone selection for sound effects is very much like recording a drum kit. With drums, you use different types of mics for the overheads, the kick, the snare, the toms, even the hi-hat. This is because each instrument produces a unique sound. While there's no industry standard for which mic to use with sound effects, there's some good guidelines to follow. Let's look at several mics that are handy to have around when recording sound effects in the studio. We'll start with the large condenser microphones. The Rode NT1A is the world's quietest studio condenser microphone. This makes it a good choice for soft and quiet sounds such as cloth movements, debris, and small objects. Next, there's the NT2A. This 1-inch true condenser mic has very low self-noise and captures a full range of sound. It also has a switchable pickup pattern and filters, which make it more versatile. For small diaphragm condenser mics, there's the NT5 and the NT55, and they're great for capturing brighter sounds such as cellophane crackles, glass, and even percussive elements like bells and chimes. For a shotgun mic, I tend to reach for the NTG3, which has an amazing sound and features the RF bias technology that we discussed in the first class. For tube mics, there's the NTK, which has a cardioid pattern and can handle extreme SPL, making it a great choice for rich, louder sound effects. Then there's the K2, which is one of the world's quietest tube mics, and it features a dual diaphragm capsule and fully variable polar pattern. It can even handle higher SPL than the NTK, but still captures the warm sound that only a tube mic can offer. You've probably heard these mics already, as they were used to capture car crash impacts for the blockbuster film Live Free or Die Hard. So let's head into the Foley room and try these mics out. Let's start off with a bone break. We've got a piece of celery mic'd up with a pair of NT2As. Note that we're not recording in true stereo. Instead, we're using the second mic as a backup with a pad in case the effect overloads the primary mic. You can start with the simple snap of a single stalk, or get more complex sounds with several stalks and twist them together. Now let's record a wine glass breaking. We're using a pair of NT55 set up in an XY pattern to give us a nice stereo image to capture the debris flying away from the impact. For the best effect, drop the glass on its side to ensure that it breaks. Let's move on to some dust debris. Because we know this effect will be quiet, we'll use the NT1A because of its ability to capture quiet material without adding self-noise. Position the mic towards the area where the debris will be dropped. Hold the debris in both hands and let the debris slip through your fingers by moving your fingers up and down. Next, we're going to mic a plastic tub being dragged on top of rock salt. This creates that classic stone door closing sound. We'll want to follow the sound using an NTG3 shotgun rather than just letting the sound pass in front of a stationary mic. With the mic mounted on a boom pole, we're ready to go. Finally, we'll smash a car door with a sledgehammer for a nice beefy impact that we can use to sweeten a car crash. We're going to use the K2 set to a cardioid pattern along with an NTK. First, let's listen to the NTK. Next, let's listen to the K2. As you can hear, the tube mic gives the impact a nice bottom end that you just can't get with other microphones. Now let's go back to the equipment room and wrap this up. Every prop makes a unique sound effect, so be sure to select the microphone that best captures the sound you're after. Don't be afraid to experiment. Just because a sound effect has always been recorded with a certain type of microphone doesn't mean that's the way you need to record it. Keep in mind, recording is only half the process. Performance is king when it comes to creating cool sound effects. Have fun and always be quick to try new things. I'm Rick Veers and I'll see you next time at Rode University. Until then, make some noise.
All right, so there's a little glimpse into the world of sound effects. We're going to go a little bit deeper with this in the future, but a nice little taste of it there. All right, and here we've got dialogue. All right, the next element. Dialogue is hugely important because it's the main part of what's happening in your films, right? We need to understand the messages and everything that the actors are saying. So some of it is coming from any sort of production sound that is well recorded enough and doesn't have any interference. That's the ideal situation. But the majority, the truth is, comes from a process called ADR, and that's automated dialogue replacement. So that's coming from a post-production recording session when you're bringing actors in after they've recorded the scene. You put the scene up on a screen for them, and they're basically lip-syncing with themselves. And that might be so you can have higher quality audio, or maybe they think they can, add some emotion that they didn't have, or like I mentioned before, maybe they had a cold the day that they were actually, video recording the scene, so they need to have different, quality levels of audio there. All right, so a quick little example of this, and this is an example of what a particular scene sounds like with the production sound, and then what it sounds like with the automated dialogue replacement. So you'll hear the difference between the two. Or maybe you won't. Technical difficulties with that example, I guess. Okay. The final stage here is music. So music is going to establish a theme for your film and most likely a mood or force an emotion upon your audience. And that's really what we're doing. We're manipulating our audience with these things. So it's going to enhance the on-screen action too. If you can imagine an action scene that doesn't have any music, it may not have the same sort of emotion or impact on the audience. It's going to add an artistic expression, of course, because, whether it's a specific genre of music that might fit the video. There's two different types of music that you've got to think about here. So score is non-diegetic music, meaning that's the stuff that is just for the audience, right? There's no assumption that the characters in the film hear that music, right? And then the other option there is source music, and that is diegetic. That means it's within the world of the character. So if there's a scene that is taking place at like a bar or something like that, and a jukebox is playing, and the characters can hear that, it's assumed that they're participating in that. That's diegetic sound. As opposed to the orchestra in a Star Wars movie playing the main theme during the credits, That's just for the audience. It's not like Princess Leia turns around and hears the music and says, hey, where'd that trumpet come from? So that's the difference between score and source music, non-diegetic and diegetic. And just to show the importance of music as our last piece here, here's a funny video that sort of illustrates how music can change the interpretation of a scene. So this one I couldn't download, so I'm going to provided a link here, and we'll watch it on YouTube. So here we go.
What many people may not realise is that music is an incredibly important part of film and television. If used correctly, it can enhance the emotions of any scene. For example, the music you're listening to right now is making me seem like the coolest, suavest guy in town. Get that wrong, it sounds like this. What many people may not realise is that music is an incredibly important part of film and television. Do you see what I mean? That was just one example of how music can change the viewer's perspective. Let's have a look at a couple more.
Here's your tea.
Oh, cheers. Did you put sugar in this?
Yeah, I did.
We assume the tea drinker isn't very happy with the fact sugar's been put in their tea, because the music is telling us this. However, if we replace the music with something else, we get this.
Did you put sugar in this?
Yeah, I did.
Looks like the sugar wasn't so sinister after all. Let's have a look at another one. Music can affect the way you observe and judge certain characters. The man we just saw seemed like a hero or some sort of leader. But if we change the music, he looks like a villain. And now it looks like he's grieving. But let's try another one. The music indicates that the man is running somewhere to do something good. This is what the music is telling us. But if we switch it around... Now it looks like he's running away from something bad. After watching this scene, we can assume that the man opening the case is revealing something to be unpleasant. Although... with a different soundtrack, it makes it seem as if the thing that was inside the case isn't scary, but rather upbeat and joyful. So now you get an idea of how powerful music is. Clever, eh?
Alright, so I know it's silly, but it's fun to watch that kind of stuff, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Alright, so let's go back to the lecture here real quick. And pretty much, we made it through. Just wanted to present those basic elements of post-production, and we're going to be spending time on each one of those areas a little bit more specifically and working through adding those elements into our sound design. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.